thank the committee members for being here. Also our guests, Bonnie, Richard, Larry, for your time as well today. Oh, and our other special guest, Bonnie. What's the cat's name?
This is Feather Spring.
Feather
She's
Spring for joining us today as
yes.
well. Always good to have an additional member. Um, So at this point, oh, also thank you to those that are watching via YouTube. Thank you for being here as well. So we'd like to start the meeting or call the meeting to order at this point, and I will first turn it over to Larry Zappone for an NFHS update.
I know Larry was looks
Okay.
like he was. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear
Perfect.
me now?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Larry.
So I have to apologize. I've got a new phone. I haven't figured out how to use it yet. So I have to leave the video screen and go to this other screen where I can unmute myself. So I'll do that. And then when I'm done, I'll just go back to mute. And then as I don't know if you mentioned it, but I do have to leave the call at 9:30 for another
Yes.
call. And that's why I got bumped up in the agenda. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
As far as the NFHS report, I don't have anything really to convey to the group at this point, since the next meeting is going to happen in January. Last January was my last committee meeting to attend, and now I'm transitioning off the committee. Our new representative on the committee will be Asif Hossain, and so he'll be attending the meeting in January to represent our region. And then for future meetings like this, he'll be invited to give NFHS updates. I would say that I thought this past season went very well. So all of the new rules that were implemented, I thought were good, and especially starting the penalty corner with a whistle seemed to work well. And after the first couple games, the players were used to it, and I think it helped also just to control the flow of that penalty corner situation and make sure everyone was ready at the right time, and that we weren't having too many false starts and having to send people to the center of the field. So I thought that was a very good change that we made from the NFHS perspective. And other than that, I would open it up to any quick questions people might have for me. But as I said, I'm transitioning off the committee. Asif is transitioning on, and any proposed rule changes that you might want to have presented to the committee should go to Asif at this point.
Larry, have you heard anything? Is anything coming that maybe coming forward for next year that you've heard discussion on as a possible rule change?
I have not. As I said, that kind of information would be going to Asif now and not to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And then obviously any coaches or admin that feel like a change is needed, they can first reach out to me, and we can work with Asif and get that submitted, and then make sure Asif just kind of is on board with sort of what to discuss around that, any proposed change at the meeting.
Okay, then I think I'm finished. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry. Now I'll turn it over to Justin for CHSAA update.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, John. Sarah, welcome. Saw you just joined us. Perfect timing. So not a whole lot from me. I will say the big thing I think that brought the most excitement to this past season was, one, the addition of our 16th varsity program in Boulder Valley School District. That's the first time since I've been around. I've been doing this since 2008 that we've had, I think, 16 varsity programs. So a lot of excitement there. We were discussing before the meeting about the possibility of maybe even adding a few more programs at some point here. There is some discussion with some school districts and with some schools about possibly adding field hockey to their list of sports. So we're hopeful. Nothing certainly is imminent, but that is the hope, that we continue to add programs. And I think that the addition of the consolation bracket is going to be helpful in that. I think that it added some excitement to some programs later in the season that maybe we're not quite used to that, and something to play for. Added games later in the season. I thought it was a great added element to our championship Final Four week, where we had additional games that to be able to host two championship games on the final date, I think is always exciting. And so being able to do that, I think, will only help the sport grow and hopefully encourage schools to add additional programs and ultimately boost the numbers, the participation numbers that we have at our current schools. And I think we're doing that. I think Smoky Hill, Lisa, the work you've done there is a prime example of what can be done with the sport. And so very much looking forward to what happens in the future. Postseason numbers, as far as spectators, were a little bit down for our championship bracket this year. I think what ended up being a pretty historic November snowstorm played a part in that, but we had been growing since basically every year I've been at CHSAA. Our attendance numbers had been going up. I guess at some point we had to see a dip, and we did see that. It wasn't by no means was the dip catastrophic by any means, but we did see a small dip in attendance. But I think when you have a game that was supposed to be played on the Wednesday that gets pushed to the following Monday, snow, some cold, I think that played a factor, and we saw a little bit of a dip. Now, we did have additional games, and so overall our numbers were up, but specific to the championship bracket, those numbers of spectators were just down slightly, but again, that's not any reason for concern to me. And I think that as we move forward and as the constellation bracket continues to grow, we'll build excitement around that, and we'll continue to see our numbers of spectators and visibility for the sport continue to go up. So very, very excited about that. Just one more thing that we're going to sort of just keep our eye on is obviously we've added the sport of flag football. That is a fall sport. And so we're going to work, Colette and I will start kind of working with some of our schools, especially those schools that have both flag football and field hockey. We just want to track numbers and see if there is any impact numbers wise to those schools that are offering both, or just generally to the sport of field hockey, any impact on participation numbers. I personally feel like it will not impact our numbers. I still feel like we can grow. I think the things that we've done and some of the work that this committee did to get ahead of that, knowing that sport would be added, is going to be beneficial in the long run. But just as a precaution, we're just going to kind of look and see what those numbers look like, and then obviously that way we can react to anything that might come up. So that's all I've got, John, unless there are any questions from the committee.
All right. Thanks, Justin. We'll turn it over to Bonnie for an officials update.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Hi. So I've got three things for you guys. I got retention and recruiting, and then any issues we have this season and the future of the Umpires Association. I'll go over these briefly. So for recruiting, we had huge numbers this year. We had a 66% increase. So we have 25 members as opposed to the 15 we had last year. A couple of those officials came in from out of state. And then we had 8 new umpires, brand new to the sport, as opposed to 3 last year. So that's a 166% increase. And we had 100% retention of our new officials. So all 3 that joined up last year also officiated this season. So that's really great. We did, however, lose a few officials to flag football or had to, they were doing both sports, which is totally fine. But I'm a little worried there in the beginning of the season about that. So with the addition of the adult leagues that we've had, so we have the high school season, and then we also have adult league, some club teams, and we now have the winter indoor season. There's a lot more umpiring opportunities and a lot more room for growth. So that's like a really good thing. We've been utilizing that for training. And our recruitment is going to start in late spring. So I'm thinking about sending out to CHSAA. Also, you guys maybe can give us a blast or something. Let everybody know field hockey. It's fun to be here.
Absolutely.
Woo. So our goal for next year in terms of recruitment is doubling the in-person classroom trainings, which would just mean we'd have two. So instead of just one in Denver, we'd also have one in Colorado Springs. We did get one new official for the Colorado Springs area, and it was hard to get her to do the trainings because of how far it is to travel. So ideally, we'll have one in Denver and then also another one in Colorado Springs for in-person training. That's it for the retention and recruitment. The second is our issues within the season. It was great. Our fan behavior was at its best. I didn't have any complaints from any of my umpires about fans, but we did have quite a few coach complaints this season from a few different coaches, lots of different games. So we've come to ask that CHSAA and the Coaches Association will encourage a strong emphasis on the teamwork between the coaches and umpires. Like this is just support the retention of all of our new officials. That it's just hard to keep new officials because they don't want to deal with coaches that are acting out of line. This is going to strengthen our camaraderie within the sport. So we ask coaches to recognize and respect that umpires are here to officiate the game with fairness, safety, flow, and fun. Because this is high school, it should be a positive environment. And so we're asking CHSAA and the Coaches Association is how can we get together to promote this uplifting experience and so we all can want to be here and have fun, hopefully. And third, we have the future of the Colorado Umpires Association. This season, we obtained our 501c3 nonprofit status. Woo! So we're seeking opportunities in which to use this status to help grow the sport. That's kind of a continuing thing, maybe applying for grants from different associations or just having that tax deductible status will hopefully provide some opportunities for the future to grow the sport. That and we are encouraging members to officiate outside of the high school season. So we've had a tremendous retention with the umpires and they're traveling. We're getting them. We just had a couple officials go to Florida to officiate, Richmond to officiate, and then hopefully next season, or excuse me, next spring season, we'll get people to go to Cal Cup. But this is really good for the sport in Colorado so that our umpires know how to officiate, not just in this state, but how we do it throughout the country and maybe throughout internationally. And then one thing for everybody is the interest in umpiring. We had quite a few, well, a good handful amount of people interested in the West Slope and mountain regions about umpiring. Of course, there's no programs out there, but we do have a couple of people kind of scattered that are interested in umpiring in those areas. And like y'all were saying earlier, there might be more programs added soon, probably in the metro area, but it would be, I know, tough to get all of Colorado kind of on board. Like I do lacrosse as well, and that's always kind of a tough time getting officials out to those mountain states, mountain cities. But it is possible, and that's just sort of a future thing to think about. But growing this sport in Colorado is really great, and it looks like it's working. The 16 teams this season was awesome. And that's all I got, unless anyone has questions.
Bonnie, what are the possibility maybe of, you mentioned coaches and the relationship with officials, maybe finding a way to include some coaches in some of that classroom training that you all do for officials, or find maybe an on-field opportunity where coaches and officials can get together and, officials can just kind of explain what they're seeing on the field, and maybe just some of that added collaboration between the two groups could be helpful down the line. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We did have one coach attend our classroom training. So that was really informative for her. But yeah, encouraging the coaches to come, that's a great idea. I could do an email blast and say, hey, come learn what we're learning so you know what to expect. I will note that. Thank you.
But I do want to say, as far as the recruitment, I'm blown away with what you guys as an organization did to build the numbers of officials that we have in this state. I think especially as we added postseason games and now to have all 16 teams qualify and then essentially everybody advance into the second round in either the championship or consolation bracket. That's 8 games in the first 2 rounds, 16 games total, and to be able to cover those games, I said to you, I was surprised, I was shocked. Usually we're playing musical chairs and having to move game times and days, and we didn't have to do that this year. And I think that's the work of yourself and the organization, Larry, just as a whole, all of our officials getting out there, spreading the word, and getting more officials, I think only will benefit the sport. So great work on that side.
Yeah, people are interested. Let's keep this sport growing.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. I know officiating, scheduling, signing, same to, with Larry. Thank you for you guys. It's often underappreciated. So thank you guys for what you do. It's tough. Any other questions for Bonnie?
I do have a question. One thing that was brought up to me for that championship game for my game, a lot of the girls asked why there were no female refs on our game. So I did talk to Justin about this, and Bonnie, he did tell me to talk to you about it. So I do think that that's really important to see that there are female for female sports. So I guess maybe if you could answer that question, that would be great.
Yeah, so that was a priority for me, is to get as many women involved in the girls' sport. It is tough for some reason to get a lot more females to officiate. This is field hockey is a sport played internationally, but in the United States, it's women mostly. So it's kind of an interesting caveat there, whereas a lot more men play this sport internationally. In the United States, it's more women. And I would love to get more women on the finals or just in games in general. I don't have numbers off the top of my head what the spacing is of that, but it is on my mind, and that is something that I would love to happen. Just getting the women that we do have, a lot of them are newer, to the point at which they can be on a playoff game. And I agree with you, and I hear you.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a priority moving forward for sure, Lisa. Absolutely.
Were those based on coaches' votes?
Correct. Yep, it was based on votes, and I know talking with Bonnie that the priority was on the championship final. But I think Lisa's points are 100% valid, and I think that as we move forward, that there needs to be a priority for females to be on both of those games. Absolutely.
Justin, this is Larry. I'd like to just add to that. It's always been a priority for the umpire community to strive to have women on the semifinal games. But as Bonnie pointed out, you can't do that with new officials. They're just not ready for that level of play. And so the trade-off is, do you keep the more experienced male umpires doing those games to give the players the best umpiring experience possible, and then continue to develop the female umpires as much as possible to get them to that level? And you're seeing more of it now. We did have more women involved in the playoff games this year than we've ever had before. So it's not that it hasn't been a priority in the past, because it always has been. We've talked about this every year, that we want more women involved in the final games, because it is a women's sport here in the U.S. So we're continuing to work on that as best we can.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't mean to insinuate that wasn't what I was saying. Because Larry, you and I have worked. I know that's always been something that we have made sure. And you are right. We did have more female participation. I think that final day, though, I think it was, moving forward, I think on both games, there should be a female presence there. And that's just something I think that we missed this year.
I will also say, like, I think, and maybe Bonnie, you can answer this. My understanding is that if a female refs a semi-final game, she cannot then ref a final game. Is that correct, or am I misunderstood? And if that is the case, then how do we change the rule that allows a female to do both, or anybody to do both, I should say?
I think the idea is it's not a rule, but it's a guideline. So we're splitting it between the officials so they all have a chance to officiate. One of the issues that happened this year is the weather. And so availability of officials drastically changed on the days that they were able to officiate. And so there was a different lineup previously, and then things changed. And so we had to go at the end of the day with who was available and who was qualified. And so that's kind of what happened this season. And yeah.
Yeah, and I can say that I did tell Bonnie that obviously in my preference is the best crew on the final, and that if it means that there's an official that works the semifinal and the final, that I'm 100% okay with that. And we will continue to attempt to put the best officials on those games. Obviously, it's something that if we want to get to a point where the officiating is to the level where we have enough officials where we don't have to see crews work both. That's how it is for most other sports. Obviously, we don't quite have the officiating numbers to support that yet. And so I can tell you that my direction is if there is an official that is worthy, and it means that we have the best final that you can, and you may work both the semifinal and the final.
I will say, just chiming in here, that we do have quite a few new officials that in our 3 new officials from last year, they're doing wonderful and they're moving up quite quickly. So I think in the next few years, a all-female crew is definitely possible.
All right. Any other questions for Bonnie? All right. Thank you. We'll turn it over to Sarah Jacobs with Coaches Association report.
Thank you. So a few things I wanted to highlight that we did this year that I think were extremely successful is our scrimmage day at the beginning of the season. That's an opportunity for all teams to come and play. That's a round robin experience. So I think we will continue year after year to look to do that again. So next year, put it on your calendar. It'll be August 16th, that Saturday. Thank you to Kent for helping host the varsity. It's really successful to have it at both on both fields. And then this year we did the JV, and we added C team to St. Mary's with our backfield at St. Mary's. And I think there was one little scheduling issue towards the end, but other than that, I think it was an extremely successful day for players, for coaches, for parents to be able to watch, and then also for our umpires. So really appreciate everyone's work on that. So Bonnie, put that on your calendar for next year for the refs or the umpires, and for everyone else, and we'll continue to talk about it. But I think that additional C team was a really helpful and successful thing that we had this year, because I know the last few years there hasn't been a C team that was organized. So excited about that. It was obviously a busy season. There was a lot of moving around. Thank you, Larry, for your constant communication and your ability to pivot quite often. And I know on behalf of all of us coaches, we really appreciate the ability you had to move things around and get umpires at our various events. So we really appreciate that. This year we had the senior game. It was after it was supposed to be after the 2 championship games that Saturday. And then due to snow, we had to change it as well. So we changed it to the following Saturday. And again, thank you to Kent for hosting that, because we were not able to at St. Mary's with the change. I heard it was a successful day, and the seniors had a lot of fun. So just one more day for them to be able to celebrate. So we'll look to do that again next year, the All-State senior game. A few things that I think will be important for us coaches to come together and discuss, and we'll potentially look for a time maybe in the spring. I know this fall got away from all of us as it does, but I know it definitely got away from me in terms of my professional life as well. But the two things that that I really haven't had time to get feedback on, but that I know that Richard is working on, that I think we would need to continue to discuss is the all conference situation, discussing how that happens. We had talked about something, and then that involve, submitting stars of the game and then submitting that after each game. It got rolled out kind of in the middle of the season, and by that point, it was a little bit late. So we went back to what we've done in the past. So definitely room to discuss that. I think taking that to the spring meeting and or talk getting the coaches all together another time to get feedback will be really important for that. And then I know it was a very exciting year with the two different brackets, and that brought a lot of opportunity and two additional games to everyone's schedule, which was exciting. So, I have not gotten a lot of feedback or talked to a lot of a lot of the coaches, so interested to hear more about that feedback as well. So generally speaking, I think it was a great season. And we look forward to the continued growth and the continued support. And thank you, Justin, for all that you did this year as well to continue to drive and really continue to grow our sport and have faith in us and keep committing to us rather than flag football. So, but there's definitely some opportunities. I know that Veronica's been doing the Colorado chapter through USA Field Hockey. So any coach that has any opportunities in the off season and or in the summer, especially, make sure you reach out to her so that she can get those on our website. And just more opportunities to play, more opportunities to get the umpires there for more experience too. I know Bonnie had said that was a big thing that's been really exciting for them to be able to come to our events that we might have over the off season in the summer. So continuing to make sure that we're just all communicating and supporting each other throughout the time, so that when we get to season, we're playing at our at our best and giving the players an opportunity to play as much as possible through the off season as well. So that's what I got.
Sarah, any questions for Sarah?
And I'll say that if any coaches have any feedback that they'd like to say from the the last the season or going into the off season, please feel free to reach out and email me. Would love to continue these conversations so that we can be ready for the next fall. It comes fast.
All right, thank you, Sarah. We'll turn it
Thank
over to Richard for league report, followed by discussion item as well.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to speak. I agree with everything that both Bonnie and Sarah said. It was a great season, another great season this year. Congratulations to everybody, but to Cherry Creek and the Smoky Hill for winning the respective brackets. Before I get too far, I want to thank Sarah. She does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the scrimmage day and the senior day, and not easy because you're trying to herd cats in some respects, but to put those 2 days together and kind of meet the needs of everybody, especially the scrimmage day, really appreciate. I think it's good for the sport as a whole, but also individual players and umpires and everybody involved. So a big thank you to Sarah, and always a big thank you. He probably jumped off by now, but the work Larry does to get officials assigned, or umpires assigned for the season, when demands are all over the place by schools, by districts, by whatever, by a silly president who creates interesting schedules and situations. So as always, Larry does a fantastic job. I think he gave it up at one time And that person who did it for a year or two quickly turned it back to Larry because of the amount of work. And I do appreciate everything that he does. And a thank you to the umpires. Obviously, the sport doesn't succeed even with the small numbers that we have without their help and giving up days of the week, evenings, weekends to make this the best possible. So I do appreciate all those people involved in our sport. We did, as everybody's talked about, add that second bracket. I asked the coaches at our meeting at the end of the year. Some of them were still thinking about how it impacted. I did hear get an email from Alex at Grandview who made a point that we all kind of knew was going to be a bit of an issue, which is the first round game for the team that finishes last, and having to play Colorado Academy. And it wasn't anything that CA did in particular. It was just that it's not a good matchup, and we knew that. But she appreciated the opportunity to have a second game after that her season didn't necessarily end on that note. And if you look at that bracket, those games that happened after the first round, the consolation bracket, those games, while I didn't see any of them, they had fantastic close scores, and allowed for some fun play and an experience that our players, our athletes, wouldn't have gotten in the past. So I think it's a positive at this point. Obviously, it's something that we'll continue to work on and move forward. If any schools out there decide to add, could adjust what we do. But for now, it really was a positive experience, and just gave some more an opportunity for people to get end on a positive note. So I do appreciate everybody that made that happen, everybody across the state that made that happen all year long. Some of the topics that were brought up by the coaches, obviously the 15th game is a topic of discussion, and we'll talk a little bit more when I get to it in a second about scheduling in the future, starting with the next cycle, and that opportunity to, as Lisa added to the agenda, the out-of-state travel, the opportunity to play out-of-state for the non-conference game, and how can we make that more of a possibility. Obviously, Justin, you'll love to hear this. The coaches were asking about having the ability to play more games. Tough to do in our time frame. We're finding it hard to find fields and availability. And right now, again, not a point finger at umpires, but just part of the equation to schedule every day, to add more games is one of the things that I think we're not at right now. But I could be wrong. Especially to extend the season any longer. And then we're running into what, of course, we ran into this year, which was snowstorms, which I've been at enough championship games to know that the weather is more like it was this year than it was, say, last night. So those were some questions that came up. Obviously, the all conference thing, which Sarah talked about, and working. And while I agree with the coaches that a new system might be beneficial, and I'm happy to work with them, and I take full responsibility for the system not to be rolled out, I do think we are able to not only honor more girls this year by splitting the voting into two groups, but we're also able to honor the correct girls. And so I do think that while we can change the system, and I'm happy to change the system, I do think having separate all conferences is the way to go moving forward, because I do think even with the star system that we were talking about last year, because not everybody plays everybody, that really could our best players in the state may not get the recognition they earn or deserve. So I will be happy to work with Sarah and the coaches on moving that system forward in the best way for us as we move forward. So That's really all I have before I get into my nutty idea of field hockey conferences. Anybody have questions at this point?
And I'll just say, Richard, I'm good with more games if the schools are. I'm all for it.
Something I think we probably could look at, maybe moving forward. The number that was thrown out was 20.
I do have a
And,
question on
yeah.
that. I know that we moved a week back, I guess, in August, because originally we started at the beginning of August, right? And now we've moved back a week. What was the change there? Why did we change? I'm not opposed to adding more games, but I don't think there's enough teams to add more games. I mean, I came from San Diego where we had 46 teams and we did play 20 games in a season, right? But our season also started earlier and finished later. So I just don't think I think maybe we could add a couple of games, but I don't think that's necessarily I think the more games thing is around the travel thing. I think that's where that all comes together.
Sure.
Yeah, so
Go
I
ahead.
can
Do you want me
answer
to answer? Go ahead, Justin.
I can answer the calendar piece. The reason we moved back, so we follow the NFHS calendar, and I think it's like 6 years after like a leap year, it moves back. As you keep the corresponding date, that date creeps up a day, up a day, up a day. And so like every 6 years, it just pushes back and then starts over again, moving up. So that's the reason for that.
Is there a way to just keep it consistently that first week of, I mean, is that a change that could happen?
Yeah, so my plan moving forward, actually, Lisa, is to essentially set it around daylight savings time and that date. And so we're always finishing before daylight savings time, as opposed to this year where we actually finished after, which I think is, again, part of the reason. One, it just takes us a little bit too late, in my opinion. But once we get into daylight savings time and you have less daylight, the weather's colder. I think that contributes to people coming out to championship, semifinals, finals. So yes, my plan is a consistent date built around finishing that week before daylight savings time.
Okay.
So it would be like the Wednesday before that Saturday daylight savings time.
And so that would, I mean, is that something you'd want to implement for 2027, I guess?
That's the 26 is yeah,
26.
that would be
Okay, I always get my
yeah.
years confused.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Okay.
Yep.
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 Okay.
Terrific. So, Justin, I don't know if you want to scroll down.
Oh yeah.
And we can talk about, and even as I've been sitting here and thinking about what I did, I've in my mind thought about changes. So one thing I think I would ask the committee to think about moving forward in a couple of years is to, now that we're at 16 teams, and of course this would go under the assumption that we don't add any other schools, but I would hopeful that we could add a school or two, is to really just split into two conferences, and schedule that way. So as I said, please don't read anything in the A and B. I could have picked any language there. What I try to do is Conference A, Kent, Denver, Colorado Academy, St. Mary's Academy are all in a conference together. So I kept them together. Pooter, Boulder is more about geography. And then you had some outliers in Denver East, which is typically and not recently, but in years past in other sports like girls lacrosse been paired up with Kent, Denver, Colorado Academy, and St. Mary's Academy. Just because we're the, kind of actual Denver area, Denver schools, Denver proper for the most part schools. And then, so the other conference, obviously Creek, Arapahoe, Smoky, and Grandview are all one conference. Cheyenne Mountain, Palmer Ridge, Pine Creek, geography related. One thing I did hear from some of the coaches down south is they didn't all play against each other in this year. Totally understand that. It's just the way kind of we designed the schedule. But trying to fix that problem a little bit. But again, as I said, I'm sitting here and thinking about it. and I wanted to try to balance both conferences out. I didn't want one to be heavier than the other. And as I'm sitting here, I think to balance equitably would be to move Regis over to Conference A and then either move Dakota Ridge or Mountain Vista over to Conference B. Also, there's, if we moved Mountain Vista, probably geography wise, they're better off being more with the South schools. You know, the North schools are the North schools, and people are gonna have to travel to Fort Collins, once every 2 years, and we see this in other sports, lacrosse or ice hockey being one of them, in which you just unfortunately that we want to include them, we want to grow it up north. We're happy Boulder is part of that at that growth, and so I think trying to lump them together with a group as well. So as far as scheduling went, I devised, and again, this is me just thinking at the top of my head to start a conversation to happen. This would not take effect, even if we said this is the right way to go this year, it would next cycle. So please understand this is 2 seasons away from now. So my thought process, play everyone in your conference once. That would be 7 games. Play half of your conference, split basically by strength, right? CA, Kent, Denver, St. Mary's Academy. If we threw East in there, maybe, or Regis in there, maybe they're in that group. Maybe, whatever, a second time. And then the group of, in this example, Pooter, Boulder, Dakota Ridge, Vista would play each other a second time, and vice versa. That gets you 10 games. If we wanted to continue to not give as much flexibility, then you would play, my proposal would play a crossover against 3 or 4 of the teams in the other conference, and then a non-conference game on your own, play a second team a second. The last 2, I don't love. I would be fine saying you have 5 games, go find them. My one worry always is that I know there are schools that like to travel or want to travel, as we've talked about here, which will allow that. And if it's 2 schools, that's great. What happens and what we've seen in the past, if it's 1 school, then there's still a school out there that's going to end up not having 15 games. It just won't work that way. So that's my one fear of just saying the last 5 games, you're on their own, but it's a fear that I can, with some therapy help, I can get over. So again, pure spitballing, pure, trying to give some more flexibility out there, trying to get some stabilization. If there's a school out there, there's 1 school decides to add, it would be tough to go to this situation. If 2 schools decide to add, then I think we can continue to go with the conferences, the 2 separate conferences. But purely something I threw out to Justin. Justin was willing to have me discuss it today, or have you all discuss it. So I will stop there, and feedback, please.
My initial response is I think this is great. What was really hard this year because of what we did from last year is we took how we ranked, we split it down the middle, or we had 3 different pools, and like personally being in that bubble of the middle at St. Mary's, it kicked our butt this year. It was really hard because and I lost a lot of players. I lost 12 seniors from the last year to this year. So this year was hard because of how well we did last year. What I like about this is that it gives the ability to kind of ebb and flow with different teams, and that anyone can grow, anyone can kind of build their program. I mean, like you said, Lisa, you've done an amazing job with Smokey this year, with how much time and energy you've spent and put into those kids and how much they play in the off season and whatnot. So like this gives, rather than having it be the conferences be based on last year's rankings, this gives a little bit more flexibility, more regional, more that kind of thing. I think as when I first look at this, my initial thought was more to switch Arapahoe into Conference A because of proximity. And and maybe Vista switching those two was kind of my first in it because Arapahoe's down the street from St. Mary's in Kent. But I think generally speaking, I think I love the idea of this. I have my one concern with travel is and I know that this is a bigger conversation that needs to happen, but from a school that, doesn't have a ton of kids and every year it's a little bit in limbo, and knowing that it's the pressure of the coach to get it together to make sure that you have the numbers to be able to go and travel. That if certain teams don't travel, that there's going to start to be a big discrepancy where those teams that are able to travel year after year and go are going to get more exposure, which is exciting, but that those schools that might have coach turnover or might just not have the resources, that they won't be traveling and that there will start to be a discrepancy of abilities. And so while I think travel should absolutely happen for those schools that can make it happen, I wonder if that doesn't factor into our 15 games in Colorado. And those games are considered, you know, like what are they called? Not scrimmages, but there's another one.
Foundation,
What was it?
the foundation.
Foundation games so that they have the ability and they can play them, but it doesn't necessarily factor into everything else we have in Colorado, at least right now, in terms of like with RPI and with rankings and all that. So those are kind of my two thoughts.
I will agree. I like the conferences, and I think that the conferences should stay how they are in terms of like geographical. Like, and I do agree. I'm not sure that Regis should really get pulled out of that conference. But if this is how it pans out, I do think the Vista and Arapahoe is that kind of like borderline because Vista pulls from Douglas County, right? So technically it's a South school. But I do like the idea, one set of teams have to go north, one set of teams have to go south, vice versa. So there is trouble for everybody in there. I think that, coaches might not like it to begin with, but I think the consistency for everybody is key. Like, and I agree with Sarah, right? We were at the top of the bottom. And so for us, like, we didn't get to play any of the teams that we really wanted to play and challenge ourselves against. So I don't think the 1 through 8 versus the 9 through 16 really worked out. And I think having consistent conferences where we know who we're going to play each year. And then, obviously if there's a crossover, it would work well. Obviously we can talk about travel in a minute, but I do like the idea of the conferences sticking. And then when you add a team in, depending on where they are geographically, will depend on which conference they head into.
Any other thoughts for Richard? Questions?
The only and again, the only reason why Arapahoe was with Creek and is that they're in the conference for other sports, and so that's how I grouped them. But again, we're an outlier, so if Arapahoe is the better switch, we want to do that as far as balance and geography, it's fine with me.
Justin, I have a question actually about adding teams. I know back just before COVID hit, Ponderosa had a rec out for a field hockey coach to start a program down there. I mean, was that a budget issue? Was that not being able to get a coach? Was there not enough numbers? Like, maybe run us through that because I mean, obviously, if Vista is Douglas County, Ponderosa is Douglas County, like that's a south side team.
Yeah, the issue was at the time they were on board. I think we even had a schedule for Ponderosa. Then COVID hit and the district put a freeze on any new programs. And so they didn't add the team at that time. Now, since then, that freeze has come off, but I don't know if it's that now their numbers have shifted and it's not something that they feel like they can add. I'm not entirely sure. But I would say that that area of the state is certainly one that is growing, and I think that there is some potential for adding a program somewhere in that area.
Who would make the decision to split like a team, like the district program? Is that a CHSAA thing or is it the district?
No, it's the school district. Yeah,
Okay.
obviously we want as many programs as possible. At any school district or school that came to us and said they wanted to add, we would help support them 100%. That decision for a Denver Public Schools with one program, a Boulder Valley with one program, a Douglas County with one program, Poudre School District with one program. If any of those school districts felt the need to add another program, that would be entirely up to that district.
Okay, perfect.
So when do we have to have this approved for the 2026 season?
So what I told Richard was that let's start the discussion now. And then we would just, if this is something that we would like to move forward with, we would vote and approve this at the December 2025 meeting. And if it was approved by the committee, it would be voted on by the membership as a whole in January. And then it would go into effect for the beginning of the cycle, which would be fall 26.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
The only question I had for Richard, and again, I am on board 100% with whatever the schools feel like is best. But my question was, it came, I think, Richard, the point you brought up with the first round matchup with Grandview and CA is, is there a benefit, where the schools maybe that are currently, and I know everything is fluid and things will shift, but the team at the top and the teams maybe at the bottom, is there benefit to them not seeing each other in the regular season? I don't know. I guess that's a question for Lisa, for Sarah, for John.
So to Lisa's point, I think it was, we're both in the middle, very much 8 and 9 in the middle, at least this year. And but I think that there's benefit to playing the top teams, even if you're near the bottom, to see what the level is and to be able to play that. So
But
I think that to continue on,
I think
at
regular
least for
season,
now.
though, I think regular season is where it's at. And I did
Yeah.
have a personal conversation with Alex about that. And there was a discussion over, like, are we going to get absolutely reamed by CA? And if that's the case, you know, is it better just to forfeit that game than feel like we're going to get absolutely dredged, right? Like, and obviously they didn't, and they had a good time and they scored a goal, which made them so excited. But I think, if we're going to talk about how we line that up, do top 8, then go through to championship, bottom 9, go through to consolation pool without any crossover. Because I do think the opportunity, for us, like finishing 8th, I would have happily lost to CA in the first round. I mean, obviously we lost you, Sarah, so, and we went all the way to the end. And you said to me after the game, like, you can take this all the way, right? But in the olden days of field hockey in Colorado, top 8 made the championship, right? And no one else went through. So for us personally, me personally as a coach, like losing to CA in the first round, and then having to play, it would have been better like we would have felt better, like losing to you in the first round. Then we are like, okay, great. So now we have to finish out the season. I mean, a lot of the girls after that game, I had girls saying, I'm not playing, I'm done. Like, I don't want to play in the consolation round. Like, I think it's a waste of time, kind of thing. And obviously, when we made it to the final game and they won, like, they were pretty pumped after that. But it's really hard to get those girls motivated. So I don't know, like, I mean, this is just my personal experience. And obviously, our team has grown so quickly to go from like nothing to making that final game. But, losing to CA for us was more of a like, okay, like we can cop that on the chin and off we go. So I don't know. I don't know what other people's opinions are, but that's just my personal feeling. Like, maybe we just do a straight 1 through 8, maybe 1 and 2 get a bye that first round and 3 plays 8, 4 plays 7, so on and so forth. So the top 2 teams are still benefiting, right? They worked hard all season. They got what they got out of the season. They did well. Maybe an 8th team goes out and beats a first team, but I don't necessarily think that's how it would work. But I'm just saying, like, maybe there's a different way we can manage that postseason and still having brackets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually completely. So I think to answer the question before of like, should the top and the bottom play each other in regular season in this conference play? I think the answer is yes. Like there should be lots of different levels of games. But I actually completely agree with you, Lisa. And I struggled with this too because, and for everyone's context on the call and who's listening, Lisa and I finished 8 and 9. She like Smokey finished 8, St. Mary's finished 9. And it was like if we blow the game, that game at finishing 9, then, and then you're able to go all the way. And like, like Smokey did, they finished it and they won the whole thing. And obviously, as Richard mentioned, there were lots of close games in both sides, and it was very exciting. And, but it almost felt like it should have been 1 through 8 was championship and 9 through 12 was consolation bracket.
Yeah.
But that's like we're the ones, and I say that, but then my team ended up like if that was the case, we would have been in the consolation bracket the whole way. And so we actually got the opportunity to then go and play in the state, in the main championship bracket, and then lost to CA
Yeah,
as the 8th team. Yeah.
I think the reasoning there is, especially with the current schedule where everyone's not playing everybody,
Mm.
and even if there was a schedule where they were playing everyone, there's always debate and there's never going to be a ranking system that's going to be 100% perfect. And so there's always that, well, should we be 8 or 9, or we were 8, we should be 7. Should we be, we were 10, but we felt like we were 8, whatever it might be. And so this was a way to sort of allow everyone the opportunity to play themselves into that championship bracket. And I would say that in most sports, and I think field hockey will get there, an 8-1 matchup is a coin toss in almost any other sport. I mean, 32 beat 1 in soccer in 2 years in a row. And so it's one of those things where I think that was the reasoning that obviously we'd love to get to a point where the 16-1 game is a coin toss. But it at least allowed, everyone the opportunity to play their way in case there was a situation where someone felt like, well, we thought we should have been 8, we were 10, or vice versa, whatever it might be. That was the reasoning behind everybody
Yeah,
playing.
Justin, I think that's the issue is that for years it hasn't been that way. I mean, I've been the 8th team for like 4 years in a row, and I always lose in the quarterfinals to the one team because it's not a toss-up yet.
Sure.
I think that is the goal eventually. But I think Lisa and I to the point was, the one team playing the 16 is really hard. So it's kind of like that seems like a bit like a disadvantage there. So for
I
now, I
I
think
think
that
like with
the
this
dream is
conference,
that.
yeah, the conference thing, I think you could easily have a 1 through 8, like straight 1 through 8 plays 1 through 8, and then a 9-16, right? Like, you know, I mean, look at D20, right? They came out in that playoff and absolutely like took it to every team. They got on a roll. They lost their first game, obviously, to Creek, but after that, they were like, screw it, let's go out there and have fun. And they beat almost everyone, right? And they took us to overtime. So, like to say that a 16th team can't beat an 8th or a 9th team, like I do think like the 1 through 8 will work and the 9 through 16 will work if we do two conferences because there is an opportunity to play top level teams and, teams of your ability.
So I guess my question is, because it sounds like we're saying kind of two things. One for this that's proposed for 2026, but is the plan right now to play the conference, the post tournament play the exact same as we played this year for next year? Is that the
Correct.
plan at the moment?
Yes. Yes.
And is
Yeah.
that
There
gonna,
would be we wouldn't do any changes mid-cycle
okay.
to
So
either the
that will
schedule
stay.
or the postseason. Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but if it's something at 26, 28 that again would like to be discussed, I think then that would need to be added to this conference proposal as well, if there were to be interest in shifting the way the
Yeah.
tournament is
So I
done.
think I think what I would like to see with this is, Richard, I really appreciate the work you did on this. I think it's excellent. I think if we can make a note and continue, I think we could talk about this till we're blue in the face because there's pros and cons to everything. But I think thinking about how postseason would be with the conference play with this, I'd be interested to further evaluate that. But in general, I think otherwise this looks great.
And I will say, just again, whatever is decided, we'll support. I think that a lot went into the current postseason format, and I would just caution against trying to make any wholesale changes after just one cycle. Because I
Mhm.
can, like, again, there was tremendous effort to get that passed and then to come back in front of the membership as a whole and tell them now that we want to change it after one cycle. I worry what the feedback will be on that. So just
And
a caution there. We've only done this 1 year. Next year will be our second year, but one cycle. And so I would, again, if we came to the membership as a whole and said, hey, we actually want to do this now, they're going to be like, what's going on with this? So I would just caution there.
I mean, does that
Understood.
come back to like the whole 4A, 5A thing really? Because I mean, that obviously didn't pass. I mean, and that's kind of what it will look like, right? Like, oh, well, are they trying to push through a 4A, 5A thing still?
Possible,
Okay.
possible.
Okay.
But
I mean, and to your point though, Justin, I mean, this was a first year to try it. It obviously, was successful generally. There were some great games across the board for all district or quarter, semi, and finals that were very exciting. So I mean, something worked. I think it was just knowing that like the eighth team to the first team is a big stretch, that knowing the 16th team to the first team is a stretch. But if that's our culture, then we'll keep moving forward, and hopefully someday the 16 to the first team could be a big upset. Because I know, Kent was a big upset this year. Very exciting. And they were what, fourth or fifth? So you never know what can happen in playoffs, obviously.
yeah,
That's what makes them fun.
yep.
So I think Lisa and I just have a really weird perspective because we are like smack in the middle.
Yeah, no, I totally get the 8-9 perspective. I get, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it was exciting. I'm not saying I wanted it
It
to
was a
go away.
good
It ended up
game.
working.
But like I do feel like either one of us, like if you had a loss to us, like you would have gone all the way too, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. I think D20 did a great job in that last portion, but yeah.
It was a fun season. It was a fun playoff season. But I really appreciate, again, back to this, I really appreciate this conference, and I think it's well thought out. I actually like this. I was majorly in support of whatever our other thing was that we proposed last year that didn't pass with the 5A, 4A, and I think this is much better because I think this is going to grow the sport in a better way, generally.
I just have a thought. It's really great to see you guys working together to grow this sport and make it fun for everybody. I'm also, my 2 cents is I'm really excited to see what the conference names would be, because that's always a good time to be in a cool conference. Just saying.
Thanks,
All right.
Bonnie.
Any other final thoughts for Richard? And thank you, Richard, for your work on this.
This kind of goes back to I think that there's going to be I'll start the email um chain and try to get some of the coaches together in the new year, because I think it would be very beneficial to have some of these conversations outside of this. So Justin, you can know that that'll be my takeaway for this, and that we can have some conversations so that we can move, that proposal, all conference, those kind of things forward. So, and be aligned. Lisa and I have an interesting perspective, but obviously we want the whole league's perspective too.
All right, thanks, Sarah. I think we have one addition currently to the agenda.
Can I add another addition to the agenda?
Add a
Sure.
second item to the
Can we discuss playing quarters, like maxing out playing quarters on teams? Because I know this has been an issue. I was just thinking about it as we were going through things, but like how strict we are on how many quarters these girls are playing in terms of like swinging. Obviously this year we had quite a few teams that didn't know if they were going to have a JV team. And so they had girls swinging from varsity down to JV, and how that actually goes, I mean, who's keeping really a track of that? And, is it something that needs to be discussed further with, I don't know, in terms of, girls swinging down the JV, how much does that give a girl in terms of skill and working, if someone backs up from a varsity game down into a JV game, their skill set's going to be improving a lot faster than someone who only just plays on varsity. Does that make sense?
Do you want to just start with that since you're already
Yeah, yeah, we can. I mean, this is a topic that's come up quite a bit for me over the past few years, right? Like, I mean, Liberty a couple of years ago did this and they only had 8 girls on, their JV team and they had girls swinging all the time. And, I mean, is this something we want to keep a track of, as a whole? I mean, I'm not trying to nitpick about it, but, at what point do we sort of say, well, if a team's improving because, girls are getting better, is that what we're looking for? And CHSAA has these rules in place. What is it, like 18 games, 72 quarters? Is that correct?
72 quarters is the maximum for an individual. And these, just so we're clear, these numbers come from the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee. And so they meet and they determine essentially what they feel is a safe number. So there's not overuse for an athlete. And that's where these numbers come from. For those who don't know, there's a Sports Medicine Advisory Committee. It's made up of doctors, certified athletic trainers, administrators, and they come up with the guidelines for these maximum quarters.
And so is that in the space of time that we're competing, obviously? So, if that goes back to the conversation of playing more games and making the season longer, those all things have to take place as well, right? So
yes, if we were to talk about adding games, that would have to go in front of the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee as well, just to discuss those. And then if they were in favor of that, then they would also then determine the change in that quarter maximum.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just know. I mean, obviously, we have our person who does it, who keeps track of our ins and outs for each game. But I mean, even when I was coaching at Palmer Ridge, it was an issue back then, and that was like, I don't know, 2018 to 2020. Like, I just don't know how much we're really emphasizing. Like, are we going to tell coaches that, hey, we really do need to keep a track of this, or do we not care? Because I know there's murmurs about it, but then nothing gets said. So I don't know. This has been going on for quite a while.
So we very much care, definitely. And so at the preseason meeting, we always discuss this. It is the responsibility of each school to make sure they are tracking those numbers. Ultimately, obviously, there's not like a spotter at every game counting, but the coaches are responsible. And hypothetically, if a student were to go over that number, and let's just say they get to 73 at that point, any game that they would participate in, they would be determined to be an ineligible participant, and that game would be a forfeit. Now, obviously, that's never happened since I've been here, but it is the responsibility. If for some reason, let's just say a student athlete were to, in the last game of the year, suffer some type of a catastrophic injury, and the parents came back to the school and said, well, this was like her 87th quarter. Obviously, she's going to blow her knee out. You overused her. And they're going to say, well, I thought CHSAA had a policy of 72. Ultimately, it falls on the school on the liability piece there to making sure that we are following these guidelines. But they are there for a reason, and they're there because that's what the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee feels like is a safe number.
Then I think during our coaches meeting, I think it needs to be reiterated that we're not just putting a cap on playing time because you guys want to be jerks about it. There's a reason behind it, and I think that reasoning has never been explained. And I do think it's quite important to explain that reasoning behind the 72 quarters, because I mean I've been here since 2017, and not once have I heard anything about this committee.
Sure.
And this year we've seen multiple teams that probably didn't have quite enough girls to field that JV team, but still had girls, swinging backwards and forwards. So, just making these teams aware, like, you're right, if something does happen that's catastrophic, like, these are the consequences and this is why we have these rules in place. But like I said, this is my 7th season coaching in Colorado, and not once have I heard anyone talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, we can certainly, again, we try to make it a point of emphasis that there are those quarterbacks, but yeah, we can go into more detail on.
I think that's important because we do see quite a few injuries throughout the season. And I do think that like it's relevant. I think we need to know that. I mean, and that's our job as the coaching committee, right? Like, making sure that everybody is aware.
Sure. Yep.
Yep. Lisa, I added that to my notes, but I think Justin, yeah, let's add that just to when you talk about it. I mean,
Yep.
I know I track personally, but I think it's when there's new coaches that come in, there's a lot that they have to do. And, there's a lot of things that come up. And so I think that this is one that should go towards the top of their list of really focusing on.
Well, also it's hard when you come from out of state, right? Like I came from California and we didn't really have any rules like that. And not that I was aware of, right? Like, I mean, we had tournaments out there and some teams got to play like 26, 27 games in a season, so keeping those things in mind, like there are coaches that come from out of state as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
All right, thanks. Lisa, do you want to jump to your second addition to the
Out of
agenda?
state travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, like that's definitely something that's come up. Obviously Tori, had some questions about that at our end of season coaches meeting, and she wanted to know more about why why we couldn't travel out of state. Obviously, John, you guys have traveled to the St. Louis tournament. We went this year as well. So I think that there is a question around you know, how do we make out of state travel accessible for everybody in terms of being able to go? I guess maybe Justin, that's a question for you. And how do we make it work? So if we do want to travel and go and do something, you know,
Yeah, so just from a CHSAA standpoint, certainly out-of-state travel is permitted, and we have many sports that schools decide to go out of state. I think the issue with field hockey is more around the schedule that everyone has. Is there doesn't with 16 teams, a 15-game schedule, it didn't allow based on that schedule, but it sounds like with Richard's conference change, and Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, it would open up the door for schools to schedule non-league on their own. It's just, I think the schedule that the league puts together now essentially schedules everyone 15 games, and that's the reason why there's no out-of-state option. It's not a CHSAA thing. Obviously, we'd be fine with anybody going out of state. You just have to have the room in your schedule to allow for it.
and I mean, I think, obviously historically CA's used scrimmage days and we use scrimmage days this year, but obviously we're not really keeping count of what's happening out there. And I mean, for me personally, my take to St. Louis isn't about winning. It was about team bonding and giving the girls an opportunity to see what other levels of hockey is out there. So for us, it's not about it counting towards my season. It was more about the aspect of going out and seeing what else is out there, right? And obviously Smoky Hill, for the longest time didn't really have anything, and the girls are quite excited and they'd asked about it several times. So, just the experience side of it for me was more important than the actual, winning or losing.
Yeah, that's probably more a question for Richard around scheduling and
Yeah.
how the schedule would be built moving forward if there were to be flexibility where all 15 games weren't scheduled for the teams. Because I think that's the current format. Richard, do you want to add anything there?
And I'm fine in the next cycle to drop, to allow that more flexibility. I think, as I said earlier, my only concern is to make sure that everybody can get 15 games. Because while there are programs that, for various reasons, have the ability to travel, there are programs that don't have that ability to travel. And so I do think that making sure that everybody can get 15 games it has always been important. And in criticism I've had in the past, that was something that we needed to make sure that everybody in this sport got to have the maximum amount of games. But again, if we want to say, split into two conferences and you play everybody in your conference once, and now you have 8 games to find, to play against whoever you want to play against. If everybody's in agreement with it, and we'll back, John or whoever has to get up at the legislative committee meeting, and myself and Justin who will get phone calls and emails. I'm all for more flexibility. I'm fine with it. It's less work for me, so more power to you.
I think either way we go, whether Richard schedules a full 15-game schedule for every team that's playing field hockey in the state, or he leaves some room in the schedule, teams still have the option to travel using scrimmages, using foundation games. So that's really up to each school on what works best for their program.
Yeah, the foundation option will always obviously be there, and my philosophy is always that if we're not looking out for each other, then nobody else will be. So I would just hate to see anybody get slighted with, as Richard said, not getting a 15th game or any way where it would benefit some and leave others behind. So that just something to consider as we move forward but that option is there for the foundation game. But I always feel like we do need to be looking out for the whole. So
Lisa, does that kind of answer your
Yeah,
question?
I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, just making sure that, I mean, I'd never really thought much about traveling out of state. Obviously, coming from California, it was, we could just go up and, I mean, we had so many teams, but I know the opportunities here aren't as easy to come by. So, you know, obviously Tori wanted to go to St. Louis this year, but it didn't happen. So just, giving teams like that as well, like letting her know how it could work out for her that she can go to. Like, yeah.
We can do one of two things, Sarah. We can either send out a survey and see how many schools would travel and or would want to be able to travel, and would want more flexibility in their schedule to be able to do that. Or if you can get all 15 or 16 coaches in a meeting in January, certainly can bring that up, at that point.
Yep. I think for the current cycle, as John laid out, it's obvious what the options are, And then I think next, in the 2026 cycle, we'll get feedback and see what needs to happen. Because I think I agree with your concerns, Richard and Justin, that we want every team to have 15 games. So just making sure that that can happen. Added to my to-dos.
Okay. Any other additions come up?
Do we know if anyone has another C team coming up? I think Boulder is talking about potential adding a C team.
Just walked away.
not that I've heard.
Okay.
But Boulder, I think is their numbers were strong, so it's certainly a possibility. But I've not heard anything concrete.
Just so I know I put it out to a few people, but Emma and Spencer both reached out to me at the end of last season about doing a C team tournament to get those extra games in for the C team. And so I'm going to sit down with John, the AD Smoky AD here in the next few weeks and try and knuckle out like a C team tournament at some point during the season so that we can, not at the end of the season because it sounds like a lot of people leave by fall break, right? So, if we can find some point in the season, and Bonnie, I think this is probably going to be an umpiring thing too, right? Making sure we have enough umpires, but organizing a day because we have two turfs out at Legacy and Cherokee Trail. So we could make it happen out there, have two full fields if we needed to.
I think with enough notice, a Saturday or something, get a bunch of games going all day or half day or whatever it is. That would be totally doable for the umpires.
Okay.
I remember they did it a couple years ago, didn't you? But pre-COVID, and I remember it being a really successful and fun thing. So
I
I think
think
that'd be
Richard, you kind of took the lead on that, so maybe if you want to give any suggestions, that might be helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we did it a few years ago, and it was a great situation. It just became when we did it. I think that's the key, Lisa, is when you do it. We tried to do it as a culminating event, and it ran into everybody's fall breaks. We did it over a 2-day period where we had round robin play on Friday afternoon, and then we did because I think we had 6 teams maybe that year. And then we did like a bracket, and I think everybody was guaranteed 3 games, maybe 4 games. I can't remember how it worked out. I can see if I can't find my notes and send it to you.
Okay.
And it all like the round robin were at 2 sites, and then everybody played at Kent Denver on that Saturday, and it had positive feedback. The biggest issue was just timing of the year.
And I think I would probably try and move towards the beginning of the season, and then everybody else can pan out the rest of their season based around that. I think that's probably the easiest way to get maximum participation from all schools.
Yeah, and I think getting that date on the calendar is
Yeah.
going to be your best bet because obviously they're so different than JV and varsity, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's like if you can get it, they know, oh, I can't go away because this is a date for my C team tournament.
Yeah, once I've sat down with John in the next couple of weeks, I'll reach out and let you guys know like what the plan is for that, and then I can start working on it. But I think it'd be beneficial as well for the growth, right?
Sarah and Richard, just going back to the last two additions to the agenda. When you guys are having conversations with the coaches or asking them about the schedules or out-of-state travel, you could make a note to ask them if they would want those out-of-state games to count for the regular season, or if it doesn't matter, because that might affect the way Richard goes about the scheduling.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, any other additions? Okay. Well, then I will take a second to thank Justin and Colette for all that they do for the sport, for the committee. Thank you to the committee members for everything that you are doing to grow the sport, to keep the sport moving in the right direction. I think we are moving in the right direction. We have a lot of great people working towards the future of the sport and keeping it exciting for the kids. And then thank you to Bonnie, Richard, Larry for being here and all that you do. And with that, I will end our meeting for today. Thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it, John. Great job as always. Thanks to the committee, and we will see everybody very, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.